Welcome to the Entrepreneurs Podcast. This is Peter Christo. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Norm Jenkins, a good friend and more recently the CEO of i4Connect, the recent delivery partner of the Australian Government's Accelerating Commercialisation Program, in which I was a facilitator. Norm and I met during our Masters in Entrepreneurship and Innovation back in the early 2000s and share a common experience, having both entered the military at an early age. Norm is a good guy and typifies the self-made man. In the interview, he offers some deep and important insights on innovation and entrepreneurship, both at a personal level and how it appears as a discipline in corporations and governments as they try to compete in a rapidly evolving and uncertain world. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy my interview with Norm Jenkins. Maybe we just kick off by you introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself. I've known you for a long time, so I know you quite well. So if you try and spin it, I'll let the listeners know.
Thanks very much, Peter. So my name's Norm Jenkins. I come from Bacchus Marsh. I've been involved in, various entrepreneurial pursuits for many, many years. I think most of my entrepreneurial interests perhaps started really maturing when I first met you, when we began the MEI program back in the early 2000s. So,
2002 I started mine.
Yeah. And I think, that was more me trying to find why the first couple of ventures that I'd sort of been involved in hadn't, progressed the way that I thought they should. And I ended up with a bunch of businesses that would, in Tom McCaskill's word, be called the Walking Dead.
Right.
Yeah, because they were effectively, they were just coasting along, making me a salary, but I wasn't really creating value, which is the thing that I learnt the most in doing the MEI.
So let's go back a little bit from that and look, I consider you one of the more successful entrepreneurs now, so we'll get to that. But we talk about, so just for those who don't know who Tom Gaskell was, he was the head of the MEI, the Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Swinburne for most of the 2000s, I think. A highly respected guy, and a bit of a quirky human being within himself. So we'll get to all that, but I want to try and understand, kind of on the back of the conversation we just had about that young kid. So, and just again for the listeners, so I had a meeting yesterday. I was advising a startup. It was really going well. They brought in this intern, a pimply-faced 15-year-old, and I discovered that he had convinced his parents to leave school and be an intern and homeschool himself. And I was quite astounded by that. We were talking earlier about that. What was your experience as a young man growing up in Melbourne, Australia? So Bacchus Marsh, for those who don't know, is in Victoria, the southern part of Australia. Did you fit? Did the educational system help you? Or because we've also got the similarity, we're both in the military, right? You're in the Navy because you couldn't get in the Army, and I was in the Army. Was that not right?
Yes, that's right.
You did.
And well, I guess my time at school was not very happy. I wasn't comfortable in that school environment. I think I was a bit of a clown. I disrupted a lot of the classes that I was involved in because, I don't know, I just didn't value the way things were being delivered to me. I just felt that, it was all pretty pointless.
Right.
I think I'd been exposed to my grandfather's business, and he ran a fairly decent-sized business, a metal stamping factory in Moonee Ponds, or closer to Essendon, probably on Mount Road there, and it was a large enterprise, and so we would work over our different school breaks, helping out at that factory. My dad worked for him as well, and that was my first exposure to what you could do, what you could build up for yourself.
Right.
And he did very well for himself over many, many years. And school was something where I just kept on hitting a lot of brick walls in terms of where I wanted to go. So you couldn't direct the the conversation. It was always, stick to this syllabus, do this, do that. And yet I was someone who wanted to find things out, and I couldn't do it in school. You just...
So you were curious?
Very curious. Yeah.
Okay.
And I used to, I don't know, there was magazines that we had when we were sort of smaller, Look and Learn, and those, and I loved reading about that. Such a long time ago for those of you that are pretty young, they were just thinking about building the space shuttles back then. And so they were talking about all the technology that was going to go into them, and I was just amazed that they were going to be able to send a ship up into space that could then come back down and land on an airfield down here.
Right. Now they're doing it 3 times a day.
Yeah. It's crazy how it's all gone. And so that really interested me. And that level of curiosity it wasn't catered for at school. Mum and Dad, I think, were probably at their wits' end in terms of what was going on with me at school, because I used to take every Monday and Friday off because I just liked a long weekend.
It doesn't.
And when I eventually did show up at school, there'd be some, I don't know, punishment or whatever. Right. I was always in detention and
you just paid the price.
Whatever else. And that was what it was. So one day Mum says, Norm, I've got a bit of paperwork for you here. Have a look at this, And it was the application to join the Navy as a junior recruit.
Right.
And she said, look, I think school's not for you. Maybe if you went to the Navy, they'd educate you and you'd be paid to do that. And that was like, ping, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn, and I wanted to learn something that was useful, but I wanted to get some money, because I came from very poor, humble beginnings.
Right.
This is not, this was a big driver, for me to not be in a situation where I couldn't always have choice in my life.
Yeah.
So I think signed the paperwork, and 6 weeks later did the testing, and about a couple of months later I was on a aeroplane over to WA, and was a junior recruit at the age of 15 in the Navy.
Wow, they took them young back then.
Yeah.
They still take them that young?
No. Okay. Apparently you can't actually enlist in a defence force with someone who's under the age of 18 anymore.
Because you could, when I went in as a 17-year-old, but you just needed Mum and Dad to sign.
Yeah. Well, Mum and Dad signed, obviously, for me to go in, but the Defence Force kept on having to go back to Mum and Dad and ask permission to do certain things with us, because we were, first of all, I was under the age of 16 when I joined, and then still up until the age of 18, was prevented from doing a lot of the activities that you would otherwise, be able to do, especially go to the bar and that with, all the other people who joined. Yeah, so that was how things went.
Yeah. So at what point did you, or did it happen for you like this, where you thought, okay, getting a pay slip's not for me, I'm going to try something on my own?
Well, it probably came about more as a result of leaving the Navy, because I met my wife. And I was trained as a technician, and had worked on gunfire control systems, radar, sonar over a lot of years. So I knew a lot about sort of hydraulics and control systems and things like that. And we were very well paid in the Navy, and I saw it as a career for me. And when I met my now wife, I was talking about the opportunities, and the Navy contacted me and said, hey, we've got a posting for you. It's a 2-year posting to Seattle. You're going to pick up one of the new ships, an FFG, and you'll be in charge of a new area on there around an electronic warfare type sort of role. So it was a great opportunity for me, and I thought, well, yeah, I'd love to pursue that. And when I went back and told Jo, my wife, about this opportunity, she said, I'm not going to Seattle. No way. I'm staying here with my family. I'm not going to go over there and be away for 2 years from them. And so that made me think about, well, what I really wanted. And I guess I'd seen what a lot of the other people that were married in the Navy and how their marriages were going and all that, and said, I don't want that.
Right.
I don't want to be away from my family. And so, I put in my papers and resigned.
Wow. How long had you been in?
Nearly 10 years at
Right.
that stage. I think it was 9 years and 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I just fell short of getting my long service leave.
Geez, you could have held your breath.
I know. But it was either go to Seattle or resign.
Yes.
So, I did that. So that was probably the first turning point in my career. And so I left the Navy and, knowing people that had left before me, and it was easy to get a job technically in the Navy. So I out of the Navy once I'd left, and I went and worked with a friend of mine for a commercial shipping support company in South Melbourne. And that experience wasn't a great one because it seemed that commercially a lot of the people were just making things up as they went along. And things were a lot more sort of organised and you knew what you were doing, you were better trained in the Navy. So after probably 6 months or so, I decided I could do this on my own.
Right.
I didn't need to be working for someone else and I'd be in charge of my own destiny. So I started a robotics company doing, refurbishing robots that were, welding materials handling robots at the time.
Right.
And that was sort of my first business that I started. I called it Rebot, for refurbished robotics.
Right.
And that was my first foray into business, which was, I think, September 1988.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was about the time I got out of the army.
Yeah.
Okay. And so how long did you have that for?
Well, that particular business, it probably morphed into a couple of different opportunities as it went along. So it began as Rebot, and then I decided that I needed to get into fabricating manipulators for the robots. Mm-hmm. And so a friend of mine and I and another guy, we formed a partnership around becoming a metal fabrication sort of like OEM type business. And I think we formed that business around 1990. Mm-hmm. And we ran that for about 2 years. And like a lot of partnerships, there began to be problems around who was taking what out of the business and who was getting paid and
who's working hard
and who's working for nothing and who's taking things for out of the business. As I was earning money from other sources, because I was doing I was a sessional teacher in the TAFE system at the time.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So teaching basic electronics and that to young kids and things like that at school. I was teaching licensed aircraft maintenance engineers their radio basics theory, so antenna theory, radar theory, all that sort of thing to supplement my income while we were building up these other companies. Mm-hmm. So I was working my ass off. And all I could see these other people doing was taking money out of the company, but not working as hard. They were leaving work at 5 and I'm working 16, 17, 18 hours a day to make ends meet. Eventually I said, well, probably this is not the go to be working in a partnership where, there's, a lack of equity in the way the business was being operated. So I said to them, well, look, I'm going to move on and do some other things. And an opportunity came up to purchase a franchise business with Mobil Oil. Mm-hmm. It was around reliability engineering, so taking oil samples and doing analysis on those oil samples to work out whether there were any problems with machinery and things like that. So it was sort of a technical job, but you sort of began with a large client base from Mobil Oil and started working with them for their large lubricant customers.
Okay.
That was sort of about in 1992 that business began.
Okay, so I guess because I know the rest of the journey, and so I would draw. Kind of talking about hockey stick earlier. I would draw in terms of the the sophistication, the change in sort of attitude towards the world of entrepreneurship and innovation, was it the MEI that kind of woke you up? What compelled you to get into the MEI later, and what woke within you during the MEI?
So what drove me to sort of look at the MEI in the first place was that I was running a number of businesses that, I was working very hard, but I was still in the business. And I'd read that sort of Robert Kiyosaki's book on Rich Man, Poor Man, I think it was called, or Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I think it was. And so I'd read that, and I recognised that, well, I was still that technician trying to break out of, being on the tools to, being a manager of a larger business. So that was the first realisation. And the fact that, I was just trying to make ends meet. And I thought, well, to make ends meet, I've got to earn more, I've got to create value.
Yeah.
And so I sort of understood this value creation thing intrinsically, but I hadn't really understood it. I sort of knew it, but I wasn't able to vocalise it or recognise what it meant. And it was the going to the MEI and deciding that I needed some academic grounding or some training from people that had actually done it themselves. So I started looking around. It was the MEI that spoke to that. So their value proposition at the time was that they had pracademics that were at the school teaching you about their experience and incorporating their experience into a master's program.
Yeah.
And I thought, fantastic, because I didn't want the academic thing. I wanted people, real people, telling me how to not make the same mistakes that I was going to continue to make if I didn't learn from someone.
Right. Okay.
And I didn't have my grandfather around anymore to give me any guidance. Dad was gone as well, so it was let me find another way to take on that information.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess if we fast forward, and I know there were a couple of other ventures there as you still honed your teeth, but I've seen the evolution of a professional person, and I guess we'll talk about i4Connect. So we both went back into the reserves for a little while. So somehow we've got this blend of, we like the military but not too much.
Yeah. Look, I mean, the best people I've met in my working life are people in the Defence Force.
Same.
Yeah. They just, they want to serve. They're dedicated. They're smart. They're great friends. Trustworthy. All the values that I've held very close in my entire working life. And I must say, I've gone into some occupations where those values haven't been expressed in the general sort of role that I was in. I've been a real estate agent.
Yeah.
Don't get into real estate if you don't want to be someone that's just I don't know, vying for business direct from your consumers day in, day out.
Yeah.
I recognised by getting into that space what I did wrong was I moved away from the B2B and went to the B2C type stuff, and it wasn't me. It definitely wasn't me. But going back to the Defence Force side of things, why did I keep going back? I think because...
I think it was part of a conversation we had.
Yeah. Well, I think you were doing some training at the time, I think, as an officer, were you?
Yeah. So my first appointment.
Yeah. And I thought, that sounds interesting, and is that a possibility? And I guess I was going well enough in the things that I was doing that I still... And a common theme throughout all of the different jobs and things that I had over this time was I had just had the choice. And maybe it's the choice, but also the gumption, to just try different things. And I just kept on trying different things. Like I was putting up TV antennas at one point.
Well, there's
all these different things that I tried.
Yeah. So there's actually a little bit of a theme here. So a previous interview I did with Sylph Hawkins, he realised at a very young age where having one thing was not enough. So, the portfolio approach. So, you can listen to the conversation with him. But the long and short of it was that, he instructed in martial arts. he fixed computers, and I can't remember whether he did something else, and he always had 3 things going at any one time, so he could live. And I've seen that inevitably, in my life too, where I've thought to myself, if I've got an employer, only one person has to not like me or not want me, or for whatever reason, personal or otherwise, and put a line through my name. That's a big risk. If I've got 3 or 4 different income streams, and I keep my income, I keep my expenses under control, then I buy myself runway for whatever appears in the future. That obviously resonates.
Absolutely, yeah. It's almost like having a single source of income in some ways makes you beholden to that single source.
Well, that's right. So then if I'm actually thinking about sacking a client. So I've got an IT side to my business, and I've got a small client in there who I think it's a bit of a lose-lose situation. I don't think I think they should be happy, but I don't think they are, and I'm not really happy because what I want to do for them, they don't understand. So, but I can do that. I can have that conversation with them and say, I think you'd be better off with somebody else.
Mm.
But if you're in an employer situation, basically, well, if this person's head isn't nodding in the right way, I can't pay my bills next month or the month after. So there's a compromise there. You lose your agency, and you probably lose.
I like that word, agency. I think that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but also, the value that you want to extract from somebody like me, or me from somebody like you, is that frank and fearless ability to sit at the table and argue out, obviously respectfully, but argue out different points of view and then come to a decision around it, rather than that dictatorial thing. So, okay, yes, boss. Well, ultimately, it's your business, so, so even though what you're going to do, I think is wrong.
Yeah, well, I think in the various companies that I've run, I think the common theme has always been to have the highest level of respect for everyone that's involved in the business, knowing full well that if you've done the right thing, most of the people you've employed know a lot more than you.
Well, yeah.
And so you sort of have this inbuilt respect for their capabilities, and if you can stay in your lane in terms of, say, for example, what my capabilities are, and let those people do the thing that they're good at, and give them the scope to do that, then you've got the best of both worlds, because you're making an income from their exertion, which is what being in business is all about. But they are happy to do that because they're respected and they've got somewhere to go.
Well, it's in their wheelhouse. They know the space that they're in. They're not forever kind of clawing. But I saw this. So obviously, you headed up the i4Connect business. And what resonated for me, aside from the work that we were doing, was your dogged focus on culture. And so, our time in the military was a dogged focus on culture. Our values, our integrity, our mateship, all those things. And then the second thing was, can you pull a trigger? Can you work a radio? Can you drive a ship? Whatever it was. And I saw it in i4. Did that just come naturally, or did you just think, what am I going to put first? No, culture.
Well, I think I had to be shown things through either books that I read or through the education that I've undertaken over the years. And I think I've always been a learner and wanted to take information on. And one of the books that struck me the most was Jim Collins' Good to Great.
Oh yeah, got that.
Yeah. And I mean that particular book, it really described the whole thing around culture and just how important that is.
Yep.
I took that forward with me on reading that book. I think I read that back in 2003, 2004, somewhere around there.
Yep.
And in going forward, I then recognised, well, that's what I had to do with the businesses that I had going forward. So I was doing my master's program while I was also running my companies.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them were, as I mentioned before, they were the sort of walking dead, and I just didn't know whether I could rectify,
Yep.
their situation. And so I chose to actually sell off those businesses. And so then I guess in 2004, I decided I was going to do that. And it took me about 3 or 4 years to get to a point where they were ready for sale. And then I chose to do that. And then so that helped me get to a point where I could draw a line in the sand and say, well, from this point on, here are the new values that I'm going to go forward with in terms of the new business and new ventures that I was going to be involved in.
Right.
And best made plans didn't quite work out that way, because that was the point at which I chose to get into property game. Real estate. And that was
no disrespect to the real estate agents.
And absolutely no. Every real estate agent I know works their ass off.
Yep.
But it's a sort of game where you're in a small town. There's a number of small real estate agencies vying for the same listings, and it becomes he said, they said, she said type situation of what's real and what's not, what's truthful and all that sort of thing. And eventually it got to the point where I just decided that it's not the space for me. I just it wasn't where my heart was.
You've got to be a little bit like a maitre d', don't you, where you welcome them to the restaurant. And you're very charming, and you know everybody's name, and and where they like to sit and whatever. And then the orders going to the cook down the back. Some people are more maitre d'-ish, and other people are more cook. You're probably more cook.
Yeah. And I'm sort of more of a bottom up type leader. It's like I'm there to support my team. I'm not there leading the team in a sense. It's like encouraging the culture. The other attributes that you're seeking from a team will flow, because they recognise when everything else goes wrong, if they revert back to those primary values that we've chosen to exhibit, that they can do no wrong.
Yeah.
And that guides everyone in the way they go about their business. So even though things might go wrong, as long as you've been relying on that principle and those principles, you're not going to lose your job. You're not going to do
unless you're working for the wrong
recoverable.
person. If you're working for the wrong person, you might lose your job, but at least your integrity will be intact.
Yeah, well, I made clear to my people that these are the values. These are the things that are not negotiable. Stick to those. You'll always have a job. You'll always have a future. You'll always, be right. And don't be afraid to make a call in my absence on the basis of those principles.
Yep.
And if it's wrong, if that client's wrong and they're saying the wrong things, walk away.
Yeah.
All right. That's your call, because that's how it works. Yeah.
So would you agree with the notion that we talk about creativity, we talk about creation of value. There seems to be a driver within your personality, and I guess more broadly, why do people come to the world of entrepreneurship? There seems to, and I think this has appeared to me since I've known you, that I would virtually characterise it like an artist creating their music, their painting, whatever. So would you agree that, in a way, business people who are entrepreneurial in nature are really expressing their creativity through the creation of a business and through the creation of value, and then being able to stand back and look and go, wow, like I've birthed something,
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good way to explain it. When you see a good artist, and they're able to produce, a drawing or a painting or a sculpture, and you look, I'm amazed that they can produce this from their hands.
Right.
Well, my hands can't produce anything like that. I'm a terrible drawer. I can't sculpt. I can't do music. I have none of those skills. But the thing that I could do is I could work really hard, and I could apply the limited education that I had to try and make a difference.
Yep.
And to not be constrained, to not be living in a world that had rules or anything like that. I could just develop what I wanted to do on my own terms, and I think that was what was important to me. So
for you, from a character point of view, and again, having known you for so long, I've kind of seen this. You're a different guy working, for you, in i4Connect. You're a different. So you describe yourself as this hands-on B2B. You're fixing robots. You're fixing stuff. You're technical, really. You're not that now. You're you're a communicator. You're articulate. You see nuance in I guess the dynamics within corporations and within the context of innovation and entrepreneurship. How did that come about?
It's a good point, because in the earlier days, I think, as I did the MEI, it took a while for all of that to catch.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I was learning a lot. And you remember Joe Griffin?
Yeah.
Right. Amazing lecturer,
Mm-hmm.
and he brought some things out in me that I didn't realise I had.
Yep.
So that was the benefit of doing that education. But the practice of carrying out the work of being entrepreneurial over the next 10 years, say, was where that maturity happened.
Yeah.
But all along there, I'm raising a young family.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to school. Things are happening. I lost, my dad. I lost a brother. My wife lost her dad and her brother.
Oh, wow.
We lost a child.
Oh,
So life, helps you grow up as
yeah,
well.
Yeah.
And so I guess you start to be aware that you've got to focus on the important things, the things that matter. And I guess that that maturity came with all of those things that happened to us as we went along, and not seeing yourself as a victim, but rather that together we were going to grow and overcome those challenges in a positive way.
Yep.
The idea of losing a child, nobody could really contemplate that, and this was our first child, and she died after 4 days, and we were unaware that there was any problem with her, but that was just something that occurred, and it changed our perception of the world and what we'd been exposed to up until that time, and then other things occurred. I lost my dad through cancer, and I lost my brother in a motorbike accident, and again, those things they just change you, and
cool.
And so that change, it was changes that I could have seen myself as a victim, I guess, as well. Why did these things always happen to me? Why am I, the one that's exposed to all of this? And we're all exposed to all of this at different stages in our lives. And just I seem to be the first one amongst my group that was being, smashed with all of these things.
Yeah. Did you sort of look up at the sky, shake your fist, and go, "What? Yeah, enough of me"?
I sometimes thought those early days back at school, giving those teachers and people in my class all that trouble, it's all coming back to bite me.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about, because you've got 4 kids.
4 kids, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so they're all very different characters.
Yeah.
How is your, character? And obviously part of it is a business entrepreneur, but obviously you've got your own characteristics as a human being. How has that affected their choices in their life in terms of, approaching, for all of us, an uncertain future, and we make decisions based on what we know, and we take risks either with our career or with businesses or with money. And are they all completely different? And obviously,
Okay. Well, so this brings about another, I guess, pivotal sort of moment in my life. Probably around about 2007 or so. Kids were still fairly young, and I was making a good dollar, and pretty much the kids could have anything they wanted. They were getting lots of toys, lots of things. And I was working harder and harder and harder, and I was away from home more and more and more.
Yeah.
And there was this point where I knew I could go really big, and I was just, the world was my oyster. Honestly, I was involved in a space. I was in the mining game and energy industries. There was lots of opportunity there, right. and I could see what was going on at home, where the kids just wanted more,
right.
more and right. more, and I was in a position to give it to them, and I sort of decided that no, it wasn't the way to raise, these kids, that they needed to understand the sort of upbringing that I had, which was, we had nothing when we grew up. Mum and Dad tried to give us whatever they could, and we had some great grandparents that helped out as well. But we were poor. We lived in commission areas. We moved from Broadmeadows to Keilor. Mum and Dad tried to buy a house in our move to Keilor, and then they failed at that, unfortunately, and we had to move out of that house back into a commission style rental.
Right.
And then we moved to Bacchus Marsh in another commission sort of home. So we're in the commission sort of system for most of my upbringing, at least until I left to join the Navy. And that experience, it was very formative, because it set me up to want different things in my future, and I didn't get a lot. So I thought, I had to change my stars.
Right.
And with the way I was behaving with my own kids and how we were having the best of holidays, and the kids weren't wanting for anything. I mean, we had a house with a tennis court, and all of these things, but it just never seemed to be enough. You just get more and more stuff, and kids would keep wanting more and more things, and they weren't doing that in any way that they were aware of.
Well, we're pleasure seekers, aren't we? I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, what are the incentives, and what are the we want more of the thing that's making us feel good. So if you give a kid 500 lollipops, they'll probably give them a good go and get sick.
Well, I think that I was probably getting to a point where I was pretty unhappy with my lifestyle. I was away a lot. I wasn't around for the kids during the week, and I wanted to be a parent who was present. And the only way I could do that is change my job,
right,
and move closer to home. Be in a job at home, and that was at the point where I chose to go into real estate, because it was a local job. And so the approach to it wasn't just, go and become an agent. I actually went off back to school, did the training, did the course. I then opened up a real estate company, employed a licensed real estate agent in there, so that I could become licensed myself after working for that person as the responsible officer in the business for 12 months. So I created my own practice.
Right.
Through my other companies funding that business and being able to pay that licensed real estate agent to work for me for that 12 months. And then I built my business up till the point where, I could say, now I'm the licensed agent, and, did all the quals and that sort of thing. So I approached all these things where I got the credentials along the way as I went. And that was an attempt to spend more time at home and have a better quality of life. Well, it turns out real estate agents actually work really, really hard, and they're away.
They drive nice cars.
Yeah, they do drive nice cars, and they make good money. But you were actually away a lot. Because you do your opens and you do all the other things, and that's just how the game works. Just
it's a simple business model. Open them, advertise them, get them in the door. Somebody puts their hand in their pocket and says yes.
Oh yeah, for sure. And look, my hat goes off to those that actually make a success out of that business, because they are very driven and are very client focused, and they do a good job. So Culturally, it wasn't the right space. It wasn't the right choice for me. But I think the attempt about getting closer to home was what that was all about. And so I went into that real estate side of things as well as into business broking. So I became a business broker, got all those creds and that sort of thing along the way to be a business broker. And funnily enough, my MEI experience and the other businesses that I've been involved in set me up very well to have a very good business broking practice. And so I was helping people sell their companies. That was a great job while I had it. But it also was a thing where the bigger I became, the more I was away, the more I was exposing my family to less of me, where I didn't want that. I wanted them to have more of me. I wanted more of them. I wanted to go and watch their games, their sports, and be involved and that sort of thing. And so that was a big driver.
So tell us, I mean, you've got some real success happening in your kids. You want to tell us what they're doing?
Yeah. So we've got, I guess, one of my boys is a professional UFC fighter. Jack, he's been fighting now for close to 10 years. He's worked his way up. In fact, I was talking about this in the sauna at my gym this morning with someone and saying, I think to be a fighter and to live through the privation that he has over the last 10 years to get where he is, you have to have a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit as well.
Right. Okay.
So I think he has that, like he's driving his own future, and he wants to have that, his choice for himself. So I'm really proud of him and what he's doing there. His older brother, Tim, he was in the army for a while. He was an armourer and so trained as a fitter and turner. He's left that job, and Tim's actually in America at the moment training on turbines with Siemens in Houston, and he is then coming back to look after most of the emergency power generation at hospitals and things like that in Victoria. So he's just taken on that very important job. So he's doing really well. Ben, my oldest boy, has recently left the police force and he's now working in a role around security and that sort of thing now. So Ben's doing amazingly well in his role. And Kate, my daughter, is raising a child. She's working for V-Line as a customer experience officer. She worked with us in i4Connect, looking after the marketing and that side of the business as well. So, all my kids have gone along very well. They're all, buying houses and in relationships. And, I think, you could, if you look at what you'd like from your family, you want them to be happy. I've got 4 grandchildren.
Right.
They're, I guess, the type of kids where you just want to be around them and you want to actually be involved. So I'm due to pick up my grandkids from different times at schools, and I go to them for swimming and get in the water with them and that sort of thing. I'm sort of filling in for my kids when they can't be there and doing other things. So that's
being present.
That's great. Again, being present is the thing. And now I've got the ability to be around. It's great. And my kids are really comfortable with that as well, I think. So yeah.
So let me just go back to there's a changing landscape in my view when it comes to innovation and entrepreneurship in the military, defence, in government, in large corporations like BHP and all that sort of thing. Could you articulate what's going on as far as you're concerned and what the problems are that need to be solved if we're going to... there's a big pivot going on to bring manufacturing back in Australia, to be more agile within the workplace, to be able to accommodate a changing landscape. I know the government departments pivoting into Southeast Asia, and we're doing all sorts of interesting, in inverted commas, things there, which is requiring some creative thought. What do you think's lacking, and what do you think we could do better as a country from an innovative to be a more innovative and entrepreneurial society? It's a big question, I think.
That is a big one. I think that the problem that I see in a lot of this landscape at the moment is people sort of not, playing in their particular wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So I see there's a lot of drive to make things happen in industry in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
But my belief is that industry or problems that need to be solved are going to be solved by people that recognise those problems and are, if you like, wanting to create the solutions, that are required.
Yep.
But there's this friction between a lot of the mindset of, I guess, what I would regard as the up-and-coming entrepreneurs and innovators away from, say, activities that would have them aligned to things like national security, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then that comes along with the idea that, or not the idea, but the reality that here in Australia, we tend to knock down people that are not successful, that try something and, fail.
Mm-hmm. Is it just that, or is it just... I agree with you, 100%. But I also, in that article I wrote, I used the word unconventional. We don't like the unconventional.
Oh, yeah, and I think that's because we have far too much bureaucracy and, if you like, public service mentality surrounding the programs that the government would otherwise run to make things happen. Mm-hmm. And so things have to happen in a certain way and there's a certain order to things. And some of those have been quite successful, but some have been atrociously unsuccessful. Mm. And, lots of money spent with, virtually no outcome, and defence and other government departments are all, I guess the origin of those failures, but there's no one accountable.
So why?
At that level for those failures.
That even happened here in Victoria during COVID, and no one could point to one person to be accountable, or at least a couple of people to be accountable on decisions being made. What is it culturally that needs to change? Because these are not dumb people. So I wonder whether there's what drives, the simple business is driven by profit, right? You're making widgets, you make more at a lower price, you make more money. The incentives within a bureaucracy, even in a private company, if it's large enough, is really different to the profit motive. It's also power, I guess, and it's title, it's influence, it's better than the next person. Is that it? How do you change that?
Oh no, I've sort of been thinking of something as you've been talking, and in the way I see things is that as an entrepreneur, or with trying to inculcate an entrepreneurial mindset and people wanting to get into this space, it's about solving problems, and to do it in a scientific way, to go forward on the basis of exploring a particular problem and then deciding, is that problem the one that you should go after? And then having decided that, then it's a selection process around the potential ways that you could solve that, and investigating the market to find out, which of those solution approaches is going to be the one that really, provides all the ticks, for the market, so that you can bring something to fruition that actually people want to buy. I think what's happening now is we're trying to overlay a bunch of other requirement around the solution to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're trying to make it socially responsible, that the governance framework is appropriate, that environmentally, it's got to satisfy a certain range of parameters.
Mm.
And, the problem doesn't care about all of those other things.
No.
These are impositions on the entrepreneurial and innovation process that are trying to be put into it that actually will stunt the opportunity for those things to go ahead. Pure and simple, we've got to look at what it is what problems we're trying to solve, and decide that we do want to go and solve those. And we've got to be smart about the solutions we put into place, that so some of those solutions can take that into account. But eventually someone's going to have to pay. And the price that they're going to pay when the imposition of all of those other things comes in, and the price is outside of their idea of what they're willing to pay, it goes nowhere.
Absolutely right. Do you think, we probably have to walk a fine line here, but do you think that merit has been devalued as part of the selection, as part of one of the things that we look at when trying to allocate the right people to the right roles because of these other factors?
Yeah. Pure and simple. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that we're moving away from a merit-based approach to how we go about employing people, let alone deciding whether a particular venture should proceed or not. When you're imposing a range of ideologies,
right, okay,
on the way things should proceed, look. I think there's always the case that in I guess a government-funded operation, that you can experiment with certain approaches to see how that plays out. But in a government-run enterprise, say for example i4Connect, it was a business solely funded as a delivery partner of the government's entrepreneurs program.
Yeah.
And in that, because I was the key person in that business, I had the ability to choose to operate that business with a broader scope of parameters around what culture it should have, how harsh we would treat the people in the business about the achievement of certain performance criteria and those sorts of things that would change the nature of, I guess, the way people did their jobs. And so it meant that I could do some experimentation virtually with the money that I was, or i4Connect was being paid to do this job, that otherwise, in a business with many shareholders and where, they're looking for a return on their investment, they would perhaps question, the scope that I was being allowed to exploit the money coming in to operate the business the way I was.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that it's only through the government service that you can do that, because commercial drivers impact everything else.
Yeah.
And when the government tries to impose a bunch of drivers that are not commercial on business, it then becomes...
It's not a market force.
It then becomes a real problem, because how are we going to compete on a global scale? How are we going to sell our products and services to overseas opportunities when we've loaded them up with a whole bunch of other stuff, taxes, other impositions on the business, payroll taxes and other, you just load up all of these different costs.
Which
on
takes
the business.
capital out of the market. You could be allocating that capital to grow the business, hire more people, invest in technology, whatever. That's kind of been taken off.
Oh, yeah,
These pressures, and so therefore you're left with a thinner opportunity to kind of scale. Whereas the conversation is, let's scale. Let's make, let's add value to the gross domestic product of the country, and pay more taxes and therefore help the country. But there's a counterforce there where it's saying, okay, we're going to squeeze you further and further because we've got to pay for all these other.
And a lot of these considerations are sort of outside the value proposition that you're trying to create in the products and services that you are developing. Your value proposition isn't necessarily going to be enhanced through the imposition of some of these things. Now, perhaps there is to a certain select section of the market, but largely people will buy on the basis of the value they see in the price they're being charged.
Yeah,
and it all comes back to that. And here we are, I guess in a world now where there's a whole bunch of other stuff happening that's imposing a certain way of operating on businesses, or trying to impose that. And I see, lots of organisations, that are supposed to be, if you like, the leading organisations within various things going on. I won't say who they are, but they are trying to, if you like, re-educate everyone around the things that they should be doing. But in actual fact, what they're trying to do is impose these ideologies on the value propositions to the customer, but the customer sometimes, or most often, won't actually pay for that.
No. To get that moment of truth, where you stick your hand in your pocket and you pull out your hard-earned cash and you go, okay, that's valuable for me. Here you go. That is the real price discovery piece.
Yeah, and it's also a timescale thing as well. So I think we're growing up, maturing in terms of how we're producing new products and services, and we're aware of the damage to the planet that we're doing, and we know we have to look at call it cradle to grave type approaches to everything that we're doing, so that you can't produce a product knowing that it becomes a pollutant, into our system as time goes on.
That's about visibility of that externality, right?
Yeah.
So if you can quantify that, then you should be paying for it. There should be a fully realised cost. It's economics, right?
Exactly.
A fully realised cost. So that glass costs, $1 to make, but you haven't taken into account that you're polluting the river, and kids are getting sick down the thing, and somebody's paying for their healthcare, and you're impeding their opportunities for their life. Then that's not a true cost of that glass.
Yeah, but it's also at the same time when you've got a market out there, and you're bringing other products and services into the market that don't have those same requirements on them.
Well, that's right.
So here we are loading up the way that we operate with all of these other considerations and cost base. That other manufacturers or people from other areas don't have to worry about. And here we are trying to compete under those circumstances. We can't.
Yeah. So polluting the river is not an ideology. That's a reality. You may not pay it, but putting an ideology cost within the construction, the manufacturing of that product, then you're not competing. You can't compete fairly with the other person that hasn't had that imposed upon them.
Yeah. Well, I think it's about making sure that if you want to run with that particular philosophy around producing products and services that don't impact the environment, for example, well, you've got to be able to compete on the same level playing field as all of the other providers of those products, and not be left hung out to dry when the next government changes their mindset and says, we're not going to impose tariffs on these products and services that have these lower costs, because they don't take into account those things where those things are made. Yeah. And then they're trying to make the price differential less when it comes to the end user. When that disappears, and people say, we've got to remove tariffs and remove it. They're obviously mostly gone now. So that can't be the case. We've got to have a situation where if we're going to become a manufacturing country of note where we're getting back into sovereign capability and that sort of thing, we've got to make sure that the places that we get into, we can compete on a world scale, because we'll only get back to where we came from if we're only manufacturing goods and services for ourselves. That's just not going to work.
No.
We cannot survive doing that. So we've got to have global markets that we're selling into, and we've got to be able to create products and services for those global markets at a price that they're going to pay.
Yeah. So do you think that there's the CEO of Qantas used the word market distortion? Do you think that, I see government as should be an enabler, like enabling things to happen rather than making things happen. And they talk about we created jobs when the government doesn't create jobs. Do you think there's an overreach or a misunderstanding on how, letting the market run freely and efficiently, where a lot of these sorts of programs actually distort the market?
Well, I think there are strings that the government can pull, I believe, and not fall afoul of making the wrong call on what strings to pull. And there's some fundamental things there that we know we've got to have these. We've got to keep producing food, and we've got to keep and the food's got to be at a value point that we can afford to pay for, and we've got to keep producing energy, and we've got all of these things. But at some point, people have to decide that the push to remove, say, coal out of the the energy supply chain, it's got to happen eventually, because it's not a very clean form, but there's lots of cleaner forms of coal energy production or coal-based energy production that we can pursue in the intervening period before we get to a no-coal situation.
Yeah.
But when we get to a point in this whole discussion where anything that we create is going to be created on the basis of a need only in Australia, then to me that's where government has to really appreciate, just don't go down that path.
Well, it's just not.
It's just go away from that. So I don't know how they're going to be able to pull the strings appropriately to do that with the NRF and the direction that's going to take, and now with the new industry growth program, because they're very much aligned in terms of the pursuits that they're going to have, and to be in a position of understanding that the decisions about who gets the money is then going to drive the creation of companies producing products and services at certain price points that are going to be paid by, first of all, the Australian need. They've also got to create the efficiencies and the value for those products and services to be sold into overseas markets. But we've got to understand that the overseas markets actually want them. Do the work, do the necessary work, because that's the key. Like so many times we've created duplicate industries here in Australia where we knew the efficiencies that they had were so far away. And I mean, what do we do with the automotive industry? For so many years, we stumped them up, gave them money, millions and millions and millions of dollars to try and stay open, for them to eventually close because, well, commercially they just couldn't keep the doors open and make a car for a price point that, meant something. And once one failed, it was a domino effect because it was an ecosystem. I was working in that game when I first got into robotics. And lots of robots in various car manufacturing plants around the planet, and all of their downstream, downstream providers of parts. All of them had, robots or automation of some sort or another. And as soon as one manufacturer fell over, the viability of those other parties in the supply chain, became questionable. And then, it was a domino effect. Once one went, they all started going. Yeah. And I was there for the entirety of that.
Yeah, but some of them reinvented themselves. They went and did new things.
Yeah. Well, that was possible, but it was a major disruption. I mean, there's still factory sites around the country now where they're just sort of ghost cities. Yeah, just big factories that have nothing going on in them.
I guess as part of the course, inevitably, when things change, the Blockbusters close down, the Kodaks, I don't think there's an argument to protect, the status quo for too long. I think if you see a trend change, like some sort of a creative disruptive technology, the internet, AI is happening now. I think you've got to plan for the winding up of that way of doing things in some sort of an orderly manner, because people need, you can't have a sudden stop where people can't, but we need, you can't hold back the tide of those sorts of changes. Like AI is going to affect particularly white collar jobs. So they're not affecting the plumbers and the tradies, and maybe it will to a degree, but they won't lose their jobs. I think they're safe and secure because they actually do things. They can turn a nut. It's the people that are tinkering around with spreadsheets and writing up like that article that I wrote this morning. I knocked it out. I mean, I wrote it. It was an abomination, but ChatGPT cleaned it up for me. I touched it up, and I was done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And it might have taken me all day. Otherwise.
And I might say it was very well written, Pete.
Well done, ChatGPT. Unfortunately, I put both the draft and the ChatGPT initially to change it. Look, I might ask you just as one final question, maybe to just provide some advice to those sort of embarking on the entrepreneurial journey now. Maybe they're they're younger, or even if they're older, or they're people who are kind of setting up side hustles. What would be the 2 or 3 things that you might give them as advice?
What could I offer as advice? I think probably the idea that you just don't give up. Like the dream is something that you always have to hold on to, whatever your dream is. I've always kept that foremost in my mind. And my dream, I think, was always to be in charge of my own destiny, to always have choice and to provide. That's my fundamental sort of orientation. I had to provide for my family, and that meant that I had to morph into different things at different times to meet that requirement. And as I've said, I had to, not just me, because Jo, my wife, my partner, made many sacrifices along the way to allow me the scope to explore these other opportunities as they came up. And that meant, for months and years at a time, we had not a lot. And the kids were exposed to that. And I comforted myself with that on the basis that, well, that's not going to hurt them. We're still there. We're still providing, dinner on the table and, a loving environment for them to grow up in and giving them some direction. And as a parent, that's something that's great. So you've got to be able to not have balance, but have, I guess I'll call it intention, in your life. And, that's sort of the other aspect of this. So my intention has always been to be a provider and to be a good example, whether that's to my kids or to people that I'm working with or for, or people who are working for me. Always to be that and to be respectful of people that I'm involved with right throughout the whole value chain of the businesses that I've been involved with. Recognise that everyone has different capabilities, and that me, perhaps most of all, is exploiting all of those as I need to along the way to get where I want to go. So I owe them. It's that mutuality. We're not here on our own. It's a team effort, and recognising that the people that you work with are responsible as much for your success as you have been in providing an opportunity for them to grow. That's a pretty amazing place to be. So if you get a lot out of helping other people, and maybe this goes back to our defence sort of thing, to want to serve, to recognise that serving others is actually, pretty idealistic sort of life, to know that you can help others get to where they want to go. And it's not just totally giving, because you're receiving.
Sure, it's a two-way street.
Yeah. So I think that hopefully that sort of answers that question in a way that other people can perhaps understand. So I guess service, respect, and maybe keep your eye on the prize.
Bit of grit, stick to what you're doing.
Resilience. Wake up every day knowing that you just got to get up and keep going, and that in the end it's on you. Nobody's gonna say take the day off.
That's right. What is that?
Take the day off. You can just not go to work because I don't know, you don't feel up to it, or you feel like you're a bit worn out. That doesn't happen in this space.
No.
You're driven to achieve, and that means getting up every day, getting into it, making small gains, and when you don't, suck it up and keep going.
Fantastic. Well, that's a fantastic point to leave it. Thanks, Norm. Thank you so much for doing this today. All the best on what's next. I'll be very interested to hear. And maybe we'll have you in again in a year or so, hopefully, if this thing is still going well.
Thanks very much, Pete, and thank you, everyone.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed my interview with Norm Jenkins. Please note that the AC program is now closed, so i4 is not operating anymore in that capacity. This podcast is sponsored by my business, Christo Partners. Christo Partners offers advice and consulting services to startups and new venture managers in corporates, governments and NGOs. If you're looking for help in developing your idea, commercialising or raising capital, contact us at christopartners.com or via email at hello@christopartners.com. This is Peter Christo. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care and stay curious.